Okay, well, here we go again with another Earth Protector show, and I'm Leslie Davis. What we're going to report about today, I want to cover this Dr. Blasey-Ford thing, Chrissy, testifying at the Senate. Now, I'm not saying that I think that Brett Kavanaugh was an appropriate person on the Supreme Court, because I don't. He was an enabler for the George Bush administration, and he enabled him as an attorney and a helper in the White House to prosecute that Iraq war and persecute those people. And he was a helper, an enabler with that. That alone, to my mind, should have disqualified him. But they brought along this Blasey-Ford, and I happened to be at lunch at my niece's house, and I wanted to talk about the Kavanaugh deal, and I got snapped at, I won't say by whom, as if, I'm anti-female or whatever. But I didn't like that Blasey-Ford. I knew she was lying right from the beginning when she's looking down, and all the kinds of things that she was doing, her mannerisms. I could tell that she was a fraud. And I'm surprised that the Senate committee didn't scope her out to begin with. They did a little bit, because when the prosecutor asked her that question about, have you ever helped anybody with a polygraph test? They knew that she did, because a good prosecutor, persecutor, interrogator knows that you don't ask a question unless you know the answer to it. So anyway, I'm going to shoot this show. I'm out here in space, and I'm going to cut in this Flamingo file, this woman that recorded Blasey-Ford and reported on her. So I'm going to paste her into my show. Hopefully she won't get mad at me for doing that. I'm also going to paste in a video about the money issue. We can't keep creating this money as debt, and that's what we're doing. The debt is piling up, and we're going to get to a certain point where that's it. We're full. We can't create anymore because we've already devalued the money. I mentioned in a previous show, when I was a kid, I rode the bus and the trolley for a nickel, and now it's $2, $2.50, $3 on the express bus. Prices are going out of control, and that's inflation. Increasing the money supply doesn't necessarily cause inflation if it's a payment for production. So the Earth Protector Money Plan, working with Gregory Soderbergh, and Gregory Soderbergh's idea is that the government would create the money to pay for all the roads and bridges and maintenance thereof throughout the country, city, county, state, federal. And we've got a piece of legislation that would allow us to do that. And now my task is to find a congressperson. I think I'm going to go after Tom Emmer, congressman from the suburbs over here. I think he took Michelle Bachmann's place. And I know Tom Emmer from when I was on the road campaigning for governor. We had some conversations along the way. I don't think he's crazy about me, but we've got this bill. What we're concerned about is the improvement of our country. So we're going to talk about those two primary issues. I'm going to show you Nibbles accompanying me today. This is one of the Earth Protector animals. I'm working on marketing or selling or licensing the Earth Protector brand to identify environmentally friendly and health-friendly products and services. And Nibbles, she's a brave female rabbit, tells a wonderful story. It's her and the rest of the Earth Protector animals that you could see on the Earth Protector website. And I think it's very marketable. I'm going to bring in a lot of money for doing that. So there's Nibbles, just letting you know that she's with me, and we got the Earth Protector bumper sticker. This little product here, this is the treatment that improves mileage and efficiency and reduces vibrations of vehicles. Whether it's a big giant truck or an earth mover or a crane, whatever it is, motorcycle, lawnmower, sewing machines, or sewing machines use, this will make it run smoother and quieter, and it lasts longer. This is called the treatment. Right now, I'm testing it. I had lots of tests, but now I'm going to one official, because I'm going after Mr. Smith of FedEx. He's the chairman of the board of FedEx, and they've got 48,000 vehicles that I want to treat in order to reduce their emissions, vibration, increase the oil change intervals, and increase their mileage for their fuel. So we're going to save them a lot of money. And I'm going to give Mr. Smith a free sample to test in one of his big trucks. And when he sees how great it is, we'll have plenty of money to do what we need. So I'm going to cover the Blasey-Ford Kavanaugh testimony thing by having Ms. Fiamungo do that. And I'll let you watch that. That's going to be about 10 minutes. So go ahead and watch that, and then we'll come right back.
I was astounded when I first saw Christine Blasey-Ford testifying against Judge Brett Kavanaugh. So this was the Democrat ace in the hole. A flimsy, uncorroborated 36-year-old tale by a woman whose most common answer to questions was, "I don't remember." A story about a girl who sometime in the 1980s went to a party but can't say where the party was or how she got there or how she got home. A story denied under oath by the other people named, notably by the lifelong friend who supposedly accompanied Blasey-Ford and presumably might have noticed and remembered when her friend disappeared upstairs for a lot longer than it takes to use the bathroom and then went off into the night, never to return. Hillary Clinton has claimed recently in an interview that she found it very convincing that Ford said, "I don't remember that, but I do remember this." Only in a feminist universe could a story be said to be believable, because much of it is a tearful blank. And by the way, if Christine Blasey-Ford had merely looked at the Facebook page of her own Palo Alto University, she would have found a link enabling her to contact her senator, which was what she claimed she didn't know how to do. Now, even putting aside the inconsistencies and holes in Ford's story, I was shocked by the woman herself, by her whole demeanor. This is a professional career woman with that little girl croaky voice and poor me face and the trembly I'm gonna cry at any moment narration, supposedly because of the trauma of reading out a prepared script about something discussed in therapy and rehearsed dozens, if not hundreds of times with the legal team and other advisors, a trauma that required putting 2 doors on a big costly house. Yes, this is the elite professional woman that feminism has created after 50 years of nonstop grievance mongering. She's hard as nails underneath, more than willing to destroy a man's life and family with a story she must know can't be verified, and playing to the hilt the fragile survivor, the victim of a trauma that cuts in and out conveniently, excusing memory lapses and delaying the Senate hearings, but never interfering with a successful and privileged life. Hillary Clinton echoed the most common defense of Blasey-Ford's credibility when she said, quote, "You have to ask yourself, why would anybody put themselves through this if they didn't believe that they had important information to convey to the Senate?" End quote. Well, who does Clinton think she's kidding? In Blasey-Ford's world, there could be nothing more heroic than what she's doing, and she will be applauded and rewarded for it for the rest of her life. Blasey-Ford's academic milieu is that of Palo Alto University, an elite private institution in a Democrat stronghold, Santa Clara County, that went 73% for Hillary in the last election. The cost for an undergraduate Bachelor of Science degree at Palo Alto U, which specializes in psychology, is nearly $23,000 per year. Every study done of the political leanings of university faculty shows that the faculty lean heavily left-wing and are becoming more so every year. But Palo Alto U wears its leftist social justice activism on its sleeve to an extraordinary degree. Its official Twitter and Facebook pages have both recently promoted an article recommending that psychology students get involved in good causes, such as the Women's March, and explicitly encouraging professors to mobilize their students in activism. On the Palo Alto U official website, the university's statement of core values places social justice first, before, quote, high-quality scientific research. That ranks only third. That says it all, in my opinion. Scientific research matters significantly less than affirmative action hiring and admission protocols. One of the university's two main undergraduate programs is called a Bachelor of Science in Psychology and Social Action, which states that the degree, quote, prepares students as agents of change in society, end quote. It's all SJW all the time at Palo Alto U. The demographics of the school show the extraordinary dominance of women numerically and otherwise. The professoriate is 66.7% female and only 33.3% male, and the gender breakdown among students is even more female-centered, with a whopping 79% of the student body being female, only 21% male. So that's 4 out of 5 students who are women at a school still stressing female empowerment and programs to support women. The university has a Women's Health Alliance, which is a student association to promote clinical awareness of women's mental health issues. It has no health alliance for men. The majority of the research groups that are ongoing at the university focus on empowering girls and women to resist violence, to train in self-defense, to bridge from high school to college, to counter depression. While some of the research groups listed do not exclude male patients from consideration, none that I could find focus specifically on the psychological health of men and boys. The president of the university, a woman, has addressed the Leadership Institute for Women in Psychology, which is an institute whose goal is to, quote, prepare, support, and empower women psychologists as leaders, end quote. There's no mention anywhere on the website or any of its associated web links about preparing, supporting, and empowering male psychologists as leaders. Now, there's nothing surprising about any of this. Of course, it's completely typical. But the consistent unpersoning of male human beings is notable, reflecting and reinforcing a worldview in which men's lives matter less than women or matter not at all. And this is the blinkered one-party milieu of Palo Alto University, and Blasey-Ford's testimony, short on verifiable fact and long on feminist victim rhetoric in the service of a partisan agenda, might be the perfect expression of the Palo Alto worldview. In her safe environment, Christine Blasey-Ford will almost never have to encounter a view contrary to the female victim glorifying culture that has been fostered over decades by feminist activists. According to the feminist paradigm, Ford has reached the pinnacle of achievement, smearing a powerful conservative man with nothing more than her trembling voice and, of course, her knowledge of trauma theory, which is also a main focus of Palo Alto University. And can we stop pretending that this is some kind of horrible ordeal for Ford? She has already received a proclamation from the Palo Alto City Council and its female mayor for her alleged courage in testifying against Kavanaugh and for inspiring other self-proclaimed victims of sexual assault to come forward. Members of her neighborhood have rallied around her, lining the street in front of her house to, quote, protect her, supposedly from the now obligatory death threats it is claimed she is receiving. One resident of Ford's Tony neighborhood emphasized that Ford is a symbol for female sexual assault survivors everywhere. She said, quote, I'm here today for all my friends who are too re-traumatized to come, who say, I can't go through this again. They can barely get out of bed because it puts them right back where they were 25 or 30 years ago, end quote. According to a real estate website I consulted, the median price of a home in Palo Alto is $3,750,000. So I can imagine that if I lived in such a home, I might not want to get out of bed either. It must be nice to just lie there and enjoy the view. As of 6 days ago, GoFundMe campaigns to raise money for Ford's security costs had already reportedly topped $700,000. So Christine Blasey-Ford has made history as a woman who single-handedly stood up against the Trumpian takeover of the Supreme Court. One can only imagine the lifelong personal satisfaction and elite adulation this will bring. So let's not wonder anymore why she would put herself through it. And remember, there are many more like her now and in the making at universities all across the country. It's doubtful if presumption of innocence and the rule of law can survive them.
So there you see it. And now you, along with me, can play this to anybody that thinks that she was telling the truth. She's a gas bag. She's from Palo Alto, California. What a joke to have that. So went over the treatment. I introduced you to Nibbles. I tell you her name is Nibbles. Nibbles the rabbit, brave female rabbit. And now we're going to talk a little bit about money. Before we get to that, I just want to remind you about my book. That I'm an author. I did this book, Knock Fetchy Ventura Out of Office. He was going to run for a second term. But when my book came out in the spring of the year that he would run, he wouldn't, because this exposed him. It exposed him and Charlie Weaver and Susan Gartner and John Woodley, Dean Barkley, Tom Heffelfinger. These are all the people that lied and cheated and bribed in order for Ventura to get into office, thinking that he would be a good man, which he wasn't. He wasn't a good man. He wasn't a Navy SEAL. He's not a good friend of the people of Minnesota. He's just a big, arrogant bully. And I exposed him. And I challenged him to a fight. 3 2-minute rounds in Loring Park. And he wouldn't take it up, because I had knocked him out. Big blob. Fake wrestler. Fake everything. Fake Ventura. So he burned us in Minnesota. But it's enough of that. If you want to know about it, give me a call. The number's up there, my website, and I'll send you a complimentary copy of the book. So we're going to move on to the money. How's money created? How does it come into circulation? Should probably be one of the most important issues you think about. So I'm going to show you a little chart here. I've kind of copied this from YouTube. I hope they don't mind. I'll give them credit for somewhere along the way. I won't today because I got a lot going on and I'm really pretty busy. So I want to talk to you about that. I'm going to show you a little snapshot from this video that I copied from YouTube. And you'll know a little bit about how money comes into circulation. And if I get a chance, maybe I'll even play you one of my songs. To those who love, I wrote a song. So I'm an author, songwriter, politician, activist, general TV show host and producer. So now you've seen the money, let's get on with that.
Today, in this very special video, you're about to find out the answer to the question of who controls all of our money. Central banking is more influential than laws, governments, and politicians, but strangely not the focus of the general public. Fast forward to the early 20th century, and after 2 failed attempts, a group of bankers wanted to put a central bank in the United States of America. It was December of 1910, and Senator Nelson Aldrich boarded a private train car in New York with 6 others. The 6 were not to be spotted by any news reporters to avoid questions. Their destination? Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia. The meeting went for 9 days, and from that, they created the Federal Reserve System. This is all documented and a matter of public record. Some of them went on to write about the meetings in their personal biographies. The 6 men that Nelson Aldrich brought together included the head of banks, branches of government such as the Treasury, and some of the richest people on earth at the time. To give you an idea of how rich they were, in 1910, these 6 men represented a quarter of the world's worth. The bankers told the American public that the purpose of the system was to stabilize the economy and to stop the grip of the Wall Street banks over America. The problem was, the guys that wrote the bill were the very same people they said they'd stop. If they succeeded, it will give a small group of men the ability to create money from nothing and loan it to the American government with interest. So why was it done in secret? Because the American people didn't want a central bank. Back then, unlike today, people knew what central banks were and understood them very well. Everywhere a central bank went, there'll be wealth inequality, wild swings between economic booms and busts, and after each bust, those at the top of society mysteriously came out richer while everyone else got poorer. When the government needs more money than they receive from taxes, they ask the Treasury Department for money. The Treasury then receives an IOU or bond from the government. The Treasury, through the banks, gives this IOU to the Federal Reserve. The Fed then writes a check for this IOU and hands it to the banks. At this exchange at the banks, money is created and it can be used to pay government bills. So hang on, where does the Fed get the money to be able to write this check? They get this money from nowhere. They literally just invent it. Here's a quote from the Boston Federal Reserve. Quote, "When you or I write a check, there must be sufficient funds in our account to cover the check. But when the Federal Reserve writes a check, there is no bank deposit on which that check is drawn. When the Federal Reserve writes a check, it is creating money." End quote. So in essence, they're writing a check and creating money from an account that has no money in it. The money the Federal Reserve creates can be used as legal tender to buy things and eventually makes its way into the real economy. If you and I did that, we'd go to jail for fraud, but they can do it because they invented the system. This is the same system used throughout the world today. Another part of this money creation happens at the commercial bank side. Every time you take out a loan to buy a house, car or TV, banks create money out of nowhere to give you this loan and you still have to pay interest on it. And don't just believe me when I say that. Hear it for yourself from the horse's mouth, the people running the system. Graham Towers, former governor of the Central Bank of Canada, states, quote, "Each and every time a bank makes a loan, new credit is created, new deposits, brand new money." End quote. Paul Tucker, Deputy Governor of the Bank of England, quote, "Banks extend credit by simply increasing the borrowing customer's current account." End quote. So what they're basically saying is that each time the bank makes a loan, the bank doesn't use other people's deposited money and give it to you. It creates new money. In modern times, this means typing digits into a computer. 97% of all money is digitally created like this. Only 3% is the physical cash and coins that we carry. Another crazy thing that commercial banks can do is lend out 10 times more money than they actually have in reserves. This is called fractional reserve lending. So who wrote this ridiculous system into law? For the United States, it was part of the Federal Reserve System drafted in 1913. And again, this is the same system used throughout the world. So what's the issue? Why should I even care? Well, there's consequences. When more loans are given out, more money is created and the rest of the money in circulation is worth less and less as the years go on. This is known as inflation. In a way, inflation is basically a tax that we all pay for the fraud of money printing. Easy money now in exchange for tax on our future generations. It's also why in 1950, a house used to cost $7,000 and a car, $2,000. Obviously, this is no longer the same today. Things will always keep getting more expensive as long as this system is in place. This was actually kind of okay because wages grew in relation to inflation until about 2008. Why this stopped happening is a story for another day. So things are already pretty crazy, but they get even crazier. The more you look into it, the stranger things become. So remember how we're talking about how central banks and commercial banks can create money out of nothing? This procedure actually does create something. It creates debt. Let me explain. When you take out a loan, it's written down as an asset in the bank as a negative form, kind of like a negative value of money, or otherwise known as debt. Under this system, debt is actually money. And again, don't just listen to me. Mariner Eccles, former governor of the Federal Reserve, states, quote, "If there were no debts in our money system, there wouldn't be any money." So in essence, instead of gold being the backbone of our economy, it's now debt. The system we're under now is sometimes referred to as the debt-based monetary system. It requires that debt always grows. Countries and people must become deeper in debt so that there's more money in the system, because remember, debt is money. If people and governments stop borrowing money and pay back loans, the debt doesn't grow, the money supply shrinks, and the system falters. It truly is bizarre, but we all live in this system each and every day. The Federal Reserve and other central banks control money by adjusting its supply and how much it costs to borrow money, otherwise known as the interest rate. With these tools, and as a consequence of human group psychology, central banks can create booms and busts in the economy at will and also distort and derail an economy by messing with it. Let's take a quick case study. In the year 2000, Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan cut interest rates to 1%. He did this to try and fight off a recession from the dot-com bubble and encourage people to borrow money. When interest rates are low, if you're borrowing money, you save a whole lot on repaying mortgages. Since a 1% interest rate hadn't been seen at the time since the 1950s, it was a pretty good deal. Greenspan's idea was that he could create a wealth effect. People would start to buy houses, the prices would go up, and then people would feel wealthier and spend more money in the economy and stimulate it. Greenspan sure succeeded in getting people to borrow money to buy houses, but they borrowed too much, and the result was the 2008 housing bubble. This is a prime example of what can go wrong when central banks mess with an economy. Yes, corrupt bankers have a lot to answer for in their role in the 2008 crisis, but the Fed has a far bigger long-term impact. So in essence, it is the central banks that control our economy and the central and commercial banking system together that control all of our money. The difference is, central banks can create money at will, while commercial banks need loans to create money. So with all of this being said, some would argue that central banks are not inherently a bad thing. They just need to be part of the government and not privately owned. The government should be able to issue its own money for the benefit of the people and shouldn't have to pay a massive interest on its own debt.
So there it is. Now you learned a couple of things today. You learn how money is created as debt. It comes into circulation as debt. It has to be paid back with interest. Well, what happens if you keep adding interest to the debt and that keeps piling up? Eventually, you're going to use up all the money and we'll be out of it. It's going to happen sooner or later, and probably a lot sooner than later. So the issues that I usually cover, like sugar, goodness, the amount of sugar and high fructose corn syrup for sweetener that people are getting, just killing us. Sugar is toxic. Study that's been done, which talks about sugar and how bad it is and how much more we're consuming than ever before. And I like a little sugar once in a while. Sugar and fluoride in our water. What are we going to do about that? We need to get the fluoride out of our water. So I organized the No Fluoride Minnesota campaign. So a lot going on. Some of you can see at my website, earthprotected.org. And I'm Leslie Davis, and I thank you for watching this show. And I hope that you learned a few things. But remember, ease up on the sugar. If you're smoking or drinking, cut back a little bit. I know smokers are not going to stop smoking, and drinkers are going to stop, but you can cut back a little bit, and that'll save you. But we need to get the fluoride out of the water, because fluoride toxifies the brain, the pineal gland, and the brain, actually the whole body. So think about that. There's fluoride in the water, and you're sitting still for it? Come on, wake up. So I'm Leslie Davis. Thanks a lot for watching.